Democrat Congressman Wile Coyote has announced a new plan to impeach the president. According to Congressman Coyote, the plan arrived yesterday from the Acme Impeachment Company, and this one, he says, is guaranteed to work, unlike the last 20 impeachment plans, which the congressman admits could be said to have backfired, leaving his face blackened and his smoking hair standing on end. As the congressman told CNN reporter Porky Acosta, quote, "I know I said the same thing about Russian collusion, and when that ended up doing nothing more than exposing the corrupt Obama officials who cynically misused the nation's intelligence resources for the most partisan political purposes, I felt as if I was looking down to find I had run off the edge of a cliff, and that I then plunged suddenly through endless nothingness until my body disappeared from view, and there was nothing left of me but the small puff of dust that represented my smashing into the earth at terminal velocity while the president escaped my clutches yet again." And yes, it's also true that the Stormy Daniels controversy ended in embarrassment when the lawyer we had lifted up as a hero was indicted for corruption, and James Comey's firing turned out to be nothing but the fair and legal removal of a sanctimonious power-mad loon. And in fact, every time we've tried to drop some scandal on this president, it winds up plummeting down on my own head while I try uselessly to protect myself with nothing but a parasol. But believe you me, there is no possible way this Acme Ukraine scandal could end up exposing the corruption of Joe Biden in abusing the power of the vice presidency to protect his son from prosecution, because that would be as if I had planted a bomb that didn't go off, and when I went to check it, it suddenly blew up in my face. Unquote. The president responded to the congressman's statement with a tweet saying only, "Meet, meet." Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped ipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
I just have to pause for 1 second to point out that I came up with that idea for the Wile Coyote opening, I guess it was on Saturday, and I wrote it on Sunday. When I sat down to write it, I actually researched Wile Coyote so I could get in some good jokes, and noticed that Laura Ingraham had used that joke before. I didn't steal it from her. It's just that beautiful bonds all think alike. But she did come up with the first. Juvenal. Juvenal was an ancient Roman satirist who mocked life in Rome after the fall of the Republic. I like to think of myself as his rogue descendant, sort of a juvenile delinquent. Juvenal is the guy who famously accused the Roman people of giving up their political power for bread and circuses. That is, they sold their freedom for welfare and entertainment. Fortunately, that could never happen here, so we don't need satire anymore and everything is fine. Anyway, there's a line in Juvenal that some scholars say was inserted in his work later. Who will watch the watchman? It refers to the problem of trying to keep your wife from committing adultery by surrounding her with guards. What's to keep her from sleeping with the guards themselves? Who will watch the watchman? And yes, that's where the name of the famous graphic novel comes from, Watchmen, yet another fun fact to know and share. Wherever the phrase originates, it's frequently used to refer to Plato's concerns in his work on government, the Republic. Who will guard the guardians of the state? Who will police those who police the powerful? Today, we have an answer to that question in America. No one. Our press is not only dead as a government watchdog, it has become part of the corrupt government it is supposed to watch. Kim Strassel, the excellent reporter at the Wall Street Journal who has been covering and trying to uncover the full story of how the Trump-Russia collusion hoax got started by corrupt Obama officials, recently noticed a disturbing trend. Whenever a new chapter in the story of the Obama administration's apparent corruption is about to surface, an anonymous intelligence source leaks a story meant to create a big fuss over alleged Donald Trump misbehavior. The media amplifies the story with several days of Jerry Nadler or Adam Schiff or some other McCarthy wannabe calling for impeachment. And by the time the whole thing blows up in the Democrats' faces, the real story, how the intelligence heads of the Obama administration tried to scuttle Donald Trump's election with Russian misinformation, has once again been swept under the table. So, the first draft of the Department of Justice's Inspector General report on Obamagate has been handed in, and the public release presumably is on its way. And suddenly, surprise, surprise, we have an anonymous intelligence leak about some Trump phone call to the president of the Ukraine. Obviously, the important story here is how the press is now colluding with our spies to undermine the duly elected president of the United States and cover up the malfeasance of the last administration. This includes the press actually launching attacks on anyone who dares to question the actions of anti-freedom intelligence weasels like James Comey, John Brennan, and James Clapper. Their critics are accused by journalists of undermining America's faith in her institutions, when, by the way, undermining America's faith in her institutions is a good working description of what journalists are supposed to be doing. This is a big story, the real story of how corporate interests aligned corporate news media with big government to secure power for the elites over the people. It's essentially the story of how the press, our watchmen, became the enemies of our freedoms, the enemies of the people. Where have I heard that before? Luckily, this isn't true of everybody in the media, so welcome to the Daily Wire. And we're going to talk about this because it really is a big story, but not the story the press is telling you it is. You know, I want to emphasize that what I'm talking about is not a conspiracy theory. It's what you might call a conspiracy of interest. This is happening in plain sight. We know, there's no mistake about this. They are saying, the press is telling us that anonymous intelligence sources are leaking anti-Trump material all the time, and we can see with our own eyes, not a conspiracy theory, we can see with our own eyes the press blowing these things up, giving shelf space to guys like Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler, who are using this for political purposes, crying out, "Oh, we must have impeachment, we must have impeachment." We can see it happening, and according to the timing, as Kim Strassel has pointed out, we can see that it's happening just as more information about how these weasels used this fake disinformation from Russia that the Democrat Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign paid for, how they used that to start this Russia collusion hoax. And it's not even a conspiracy on the level of the press, like they're all getting together and saying, here's what we're going to do. Here's the way this works, all right? Big business now understands that big government is good for big business, okay? This is called crony capitalism. I am sorry it has the word capitalism in it because there's nothing capitalist about it. Socialism is good for big business. It is good for the powerful. Why? Because in capitalism, the way you make money is by what you do. You invent an iPhone and people say, wow, that's great. I will give you my money for that iPhone. You make a lot of money, they get an iPhone. That's capitalism. Under socialism and under any other form of top-down organization of the economy, it's who you know. It's whether you know Congressman this or Senator that and can pay him off in one way or another. It doesn't have to be like a brown bag full of money. It can be some favor you do for him, something, hiring the vice president's son to put him in a position where he can use his power to use vice president. Let's just call him Biden's power to do something. That is why it's always good for big business to have big government, right? If there's small government, if there's little regulation, then I can come along and invent a better iPhone in my garage, and suddenly I'm making that kind of money. But if there's a lot of regulation stopping me from doing that, if I have to know the powerful people, then the little guy in his garage has no chance at all of bringing down the big guy. Big corporations like big government. So if you are a big corporation with a news arm, right, with a powerful news arm like NBC or ABC, you don't have to have a conspiracy. You simply hire all Democrats. Think about this for just a second, okay? The left, which measures everything by numbers, right? It's a materialist, the left is a materialist philosophy. They have a materialist philosophy. So everything is measured by numbers. If you don't have the right number of blacks winning the Oscars, then Oscars must be so white. It must be because blacks are being kept away. In fact, by the way, blacks have won Oscars in exactly the right numbers for the last, 15, 20 years. But if you can't show immediately, there are just as many blacks every year as whites winning the Oscars, you are somehow a bigot. That's the way they measure everything. It never mind that women do different work than men do. If they're not getting exactly the same amount of money, then something must be unfair. Consider that's the way they think of everything. And then consider the fact that no major news organization has a Trump supporter at all in a position of editorial power, okay? Not a conspiracy, because each person is an honest person. Each person is a decent left-wing Democrat trying to do his job as a reporter and doesn't happen to notice that the guy next to him is also a decent left-wing Democrat, and the guy next to him and the guy next to him and the girl next to them, on and on down the line, they all think the same thing. And each one of them thinks he's doing his job, but it never occurs to them that, 64 million people voted for Donald Trump. Maybe they should have some representatives in the major news organizations, right? So the corporation is protecting its interests. It loves big government, so it hires people who think big government is moral. only those people, and ultimately that's how you get a dishonest news organization that is now being used by our intelligence services, who, what are they good at? They're good at using people. That's what spies do. They use people to pass information and misinformation to other people. That is what they do. They are now using the press, and the press is going along with it. So the story is that some whistleblower has alleged, or we're not even sure. We haven't even talked to the whistleblower. The Wall Street Journal seems to have the closest thing to a source on this story. But there was a call between Donald Trump and the president of the Ukraine, and Trump urged the president of the Ukraine to investigate Hunter Biden. And Trump admits this. We have a clip of Donald Trump saying, yes, this is what he did, but there was nothing wrong with it. This is cut 5.
The conversation I had with the president of Ukraine was absolutely perfect. And people better find out who these people are that are trying to subvert our country, because here we go again. These are bad people. But the conversation I had with the president of Ukraine was absolutely a 10. It was perfect. Now, what you have to do is look at the corruption on the Democrat side. Take a look at how the whole witch hunt started. Now they want to try and start another witch hunt, but unfortunately this one is reverting now to Joe Biden, because he's done some very bad things. And I'm not even looking to hurt him, to be honest. He needs all the help he can get. I'm not looking to hurt him. I'm not looking to hurt his family. But the corruption and what he said is a terrible thing.
All right, and we're going to get into that in a minute because the corruption. This is, by the way, just to put this up front, to put the lead in the lead, I think this is the end of Joe Biden's run for the presidency. I think this story that is supposed to bring down Donald Trump is the end of Joe Biden. Now, I thought Joe Biden was going to lose anyway. I think Elizabeth Warren is now ahead in Iowa. Once she wins in Iowa, the myth of Joe Biden's electability disappears. People are saying, well, in the South, the blacks don't like Elizabeth Warren, so they'll show up for Biden. Maybe, but my experience is that people who wait too long for their wins don't get any wins. And I just think this story is going to be the end of Biden. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Vadim Prystaiko also says that nothing untoward went on. And really, the thing that is untoward is the fact that this private conversation between two presidents was leaked to the press. And that is a problem, right? Because we want our leaders to be able to talk to one another in private. But here is the Ukrainian foreign minister.
I think that the situation that's taking place with the Americans, between Ukraine and the U.S., this confrontation between Republicans and Democrats, all these speculations that Ukraine helped the Democrats, that we wanted a President Clinton instead of President Trump, this is a result of misinformation and evil intentions of certain people. We lost a lot of momentum of progress. Those who work in relations between Ukraine and the USA understood that we worked with both parties. We always valued the help from both sides, and our priorities won't change with relation to the U.S., regardless of who's in the administration. Different American presidents have supported us, and we value the support of Congress, but that doesn't mean we could or have the capability of, even in theory, of helping one or the other party. I want to say that we're an independent country. We have our own secrets. Our president has the right to speak to another president so that that conversation remains confidential. This is the one precondition that leaders set each other, so that they can exchange sensitive information. American investigators have the full right to turn to the U.S. and to get this information if they think that our president has been pressured. They can clear this up. I know what they spoke about, and I don't think there was any coercion.
Okay, so there's the story. And, you know, look, it's worth finding out what was going on. You don't want the president pressuring the Ukraine to do something against a political opponent, although I'm sure they all do this kind of stuff. But don't listen to stuff like they'll use this term, when the investigating agency looked at this, they said it was an urgent matter. That is a term of art that does not necessarily mean an urgent matter for us, for the people. It just means that it needs to be passed along. So, of course, now we have the Democrats trying to use this as they have in their Wile Coyote way. Let's take Adam Schiff, because he's the most McCarthyite of the McCarthyites, talking about this in his restrained way, his restrained and cautious way.
This would be, I think, the most profound violation of the presidential oath of office, certainly during this presidency, which says a lot, but perhaps during just about any presidency. There is no privilege that covers corruption. There is no privilege to engage in underhanded discussions. And again, I don't know if this is the subject of the whistleblower complaint, but if it is, it needs to be exposed. And we know the Inspector General found that complaint urgent. We also know the Inspector General found this did not involve a policy disagreement. It's one thing if you're talking about a presidential communication that involves a policy issue, that is not a valid whistleblower complaint. But here the Inspector General said, this is not what's at issue. We're talking about serious or flagrant abuse, impropriety, potential violation of law. And there's no privilege that protects that. And the reason I think that if these two issues are in fact one issue, if there was a relationship between this complaint and this issue, you have not only this illicit conduct by the President of the United States, but you also have the added element of a cover-up.
This is one of the most amazing things about this statement, because we all remember Adam Schiff has been doing this through the whole Russia collusion hoax. He was doing this all the time. I have in my hand absolute proof of collusion that nobody ever asked him to open the envelope. I mean, this complete McCarthyism that he uses. What my favorite thing about this was Susan Hennessy, I believe it was, a commentator at CNN, tweets this out with the statement, wow, you know, Schiff is usually so restrained and cautious about his comments that this is really big news. I mean, do they think we're idiots? Or are they idiots? One or the other. It's one or the other. Either she is a fool who thinks that this guy has been restrained and cautious when he has been the most McCarthyite of the McCarthyites, or they think we're not paying attention and this time we're suddenly going to go, oh yeah, you lied to us for 3 years, but now you must be telling the truth. I just have to play this just for the absolute comedy of it. Carl Bernstein, who I nicknamed during the Russia collusion hoax, I nicknamed Carl, it's worse than Watergate Bernstein. Here he is on this.
Watergate was very much an attempt by Richard Nixon to undermine the democratic electoral process of the United States, our very basis of democracy, the electoral system, by trying through political espionage and sabotage to manipulate the opposition party into nominating, through political dirty tricks and misinformation, its weakest candidate. And something of the same thing seems to be happening here, where Biden, who Trump and his people have said they fear the most in terms of being an opponent, has been the object of these perhaps dirty tricks and abuses of power. And one thing Nixon never did was engage a foreign power to investigate a candidate running for office in the United States. It is a grievous offense if this is what happened, and it seems to be.
What I love about this clip, if you're not watching, if you're listening, is the serious look on Brian Stelter's face as he listens to this, how the guy keeps from exploding with laughter. Like whenever this guy says it's worse than Watergate, it's all he ever says about anything. Oh my goodness, Trump crossed the street. This is worse. No, Nixon crossed the street. This is worse than Watergate. It's unbelievable that he could keep a straight face throughout that. But he thinks you're going to be fooled. That's why, if you're watching CNN, would make you virtually unique in the United States of America. Hunter Biden has been a problem for Joe Biden, and you know, it really is sad. Biden has lost a lot of family, very tragic. Biden, his wife and children were going Christmas tree shopping, and at an intersection, they were hit by a truck. His wife and daughter were killed instantly. His son, Beau, who later died, sustained broken bones, and Hunter also suffered a severe head injury. If you've ever seen the movie, the good ghost story movie called The Changeling, it's based on that horrible accident. And Hunter Biden has had a mess of a life. He has had drug problems, addiction problems. He divorced his first wife and then had an affair with his brother's widow. And he's been sued for child support. He has just had a very, very messed up life. But the thing that it concerns us, right, his personal problems are not really our business, but the thing that concerns us is the fact that his career has kind of hooked itself to Biden's career, so that where Biden was, where Biden had influence, there was Hunter. So, for instance, he had a job with MBNA America, a banking holding company that was based in Delaware. And they were one of the largest donors to Biden's campaign, right? He also was in the Clinton administration. He got a job with Commerce, because of his contacts with William Daley, who was the son of the 5-term Chicago mayor. So this is like real Democrat machine stuff. Anyway, all of this ended with his having the point in question is he had a job with an energy, a natural gas extraction company named Burisma in the Ukraine when Vice President Joe Biden was assigned to the Ukraine after the Russian invasion and their annexing of Crimea, right? So Biden is going over there, and Hunter is making $50,000, I think, a month. He's making $50,000 a month advising Burisma on natural gas extraction, about which he knows absolutely nothing. So this is obviously, I mean, just by history, judging by history, this is the thing that is now going to blow up on the Democrats as they once again go on this worse than Watergate, absolute impeachment tear. This is what I think is going to happen. I think it's going to basically end Biden's political career. Biden is obviously upset when a Fox News reporter comes up to him and asks him about it. This is cut number 7.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
And so how do you know?
Let's talk about, here's what I know. I know Trump deserves to be investigated. He is violating every basic norm of a president. You should be asking him the question, why is he on the phone with a foreign leader, trying to intimidate a foreign leader? If that's what happened, that appears what happened. You should be looking at Trump. Trump's doing this because he knows I'll beat him like a drum. And he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me. Everybody looked at this, and everybody's looked at it and said there's nothing there. Ask the right questions.
Ask the right questions. That is good advice for a politician to give to a reporter. He wants to be asked the questions that he wants to be asked. He's lying about never, according to the New Yorker. The New Yorker has run a piece trying to get out in front of this, talking about all of Hunter Biden's misjudgments, let's call them, or bad actions, in a very sympathetic light, putting them all in a very sympathetic light. To their credit, the New York Times was on this during the Obama administration, saying, hey, you know, he may not be corrupt, but this kind of looks corrupt. But the New Yorker has been trying to sell this as kind of, oh, poor boy, he was in this car accident and he's had a hard life and all this. He's kind of the Fredo of the family and whatever. But even according to the New Yorker, they did have a conversation where Biden went to him when he was at Burisma and said, do you know what you're doing here? This is according to Hunter Biden. Biden went up to him and said, are you sure you know what you're doing? And Hunter Biden said, yes, I do. Anyway, as Biden was going over to the Ukraine, there was a prosecutor who, depending on who you listen to, was either a corrupt prosecutor not doing his job at reforming the government, the corrupt government of the Ukraine, or if you listen to the Republicans, he was investigating Hunter Biden and Biden got rid of him. But here is Biden bragging about how he used the power of the presidency when he was vice president to force them to fire this prosecutor. So you have to judge for yourself whether he was firing a guy who wasn't doing enough to get at the corruption in the Ukraine, or he fired this guy because he was too close to getting at the corruption that included Biden's son.
I remember going over, convincing our team, our others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
So obviously you're going to hear it from both sides. Biden says, oh, I got rid of this guy because he wasn't investigating corruption. The Republicans are telling you, no, he got rid of this guy because he was investigating Hunter Biden. It's going to be a while before we find out. But this is going to be the story. And the real story again is we have a corporate media. The big corporations, they love big government. So they hire people who support big government. They are just absolutely completely inundated. Our media is completely inundated with people who all agree with one another. I've talked about this a million times, but still, now the intelligence apparatus of this country, whose job it is to manipulate information and manipulate people so they send out the information they want, are using those powers and those talents on our willing press. That's what's happening. Every time a piece of information comes out that threatens to reveal the malfeasance in the Obama administration of our intelligence community, every time it's about to come out, we suddenly get a leak from anonymous intelligence sources telling us that Donald Trump needs to be impeached, and then that's picked up by Adam Schiff and is picked up by Carl, worse than Watergate Bernstein, and that's the story. This is something that is actually happening in plain sight. Again, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is what I call a conspiracy of interests. This is people whose powerful interests align. And what is their interest? Their interest is in big government so that there's lots of regulation that keeps little guys out of competing, and so that they know who to go to get the things from government they want. Under capitalism, it's what you do. Under crony capitalism, another name for which is socialism, it's who you know. And it's just a lot easier to run a big business if all you have to do is go to the right senator or the right congressman. It really is, when you say who will watch the Watchmen, it's not a joke. I mean, these guys, their job is supposed to be to tear the president and the powerful apart. But they didn't do it for 8 years during the Obama administration, so they now have no credibility whatsoever. And all they do every day is use these intelligence sources, these anonymous intelligence sources, to trap Donald Trump. Listen, I'm not sure what happened on this phone call. The president has the right to say virtually anything he wants to the president of another country. He virtually has complete power to do this. There is every reason to believe that the statute governing the thing that they're talking about doesn't actually apply to the president at all. So all of this is smoke and mirrors. All of this is from a Democrat party that still hasn't gotten over the fact that they've lost and may well lose again in 2020. But what is really the big story is the way our intelligence services are using a willing press to undermine the president and protect the power of the elite. And that is an actual big story. And we'll see if anybody outside of Kimberly Strassel at the Wall Street Journal, we'll see if anybody is going to cover that story. Knowles.
How's it going?
All right, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
What's happening?
Well, I think you know.
I did an evil thing to you.
You did an evil thing to me last time.
It's Jacob Airy's fault. He gave me the idea, and I laughed so hard at the suffering it would cause you.
This movie, you made me watch Chelsea Handler's documentary on white privilege, which is called Hello Privilege, It's Me, Chelsea.
Even I can't believe I did that.
It's so outrageous. This documentary is so bad that Jacob Airy must like it. This is really terrible.
Jacob Airy, who tweeted, by the way, that the sequels to Star Wars, did I tell you this?
The
prequels to Star Wars were masterpieces. Now
that's to put this into perspective.
So into perspective, this is why he's trying to save his reputation by destroying you.
Well, to build on the theme you were just talking about, I can certainly assure you that this movie is worse than Watergate. So I just looked on Rotten Tomatoes after I watched it. I didn't want to set myself up for a night. The score on Rotten Tomatoes, there's no tomato meter. There's no actual critic score yet. Because I'm sure the critics are all friends with Chelsea Handler. They don't want to do that to her. Right. The audience score is 10%.
Is it really?
It's 10%, yeah,
wow,
and which is generous. They're very nice people on Rotten Tomatoes.
The movie, of partisans in there. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
The movie is about Chelsea Handler exploring her own white privilege, which is interesting because she's Jewish. And so the question is do Jewish people have white privilege? Because it seems like for a lot of history they haven't had a lot of white privilege. So it's a little tricky question.
I don't even want to make a joke about that. It's such an awful thought. Yeah, go ahead.
So there's this moment where she goes in early in the documentary and sits down at the USC Law School, anti-white privilege alliance. She's at this group of, I guess, mostly minority students, and some of them are performing slam poetry, which is, as you know, the death of art.
I have seen slam poetry, yes. I've actually been to poetry slams.
Oh, God. Yes, this is bad even by slam poetry standards. Yeah. And it's just all these people at one of the most elite, privileged, wealthy schools in the whole country, in maybe the nicest, wealthiest, most beautiful, good weather city in the country, complaining about how society done them wrong, and they have nothing, and they can never get anywhere. And
wait, the white people are complaining?
No. This is. It's hard to tell actually, because some people are a mixed race, obviously, but all that matters is their minority race and not if they're white at all.
Yeah.
And Chelsea Handler is there, and she's talking about her privilege, and they're kind of yelling at her, and she's trying to fit in, and it's really awkward because obviously this is not a representative group of racial minorities. This is the most extreme, leftist, indoctrinated, affluent, privileged group of...
You know what's classic about this to me? Seriously, this is what the left does to everybody, right? Let's pretend.
Yeah.
Let's pretend that white privilege is a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And I could see in certain regards where it might be a thing.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you want to live a crap life, I mean, just a bad life, worry about the privilege that someone else has instead of what you have and what you're going to do with it. I mean, that's just it's a recipe for a bad life.
You know what Chelsea says in this meeting is it's the most profound line of the whole documentary. She said, after she left the meeting and was talking to the camera in her car, she said, "It felt good because they put me in my place." That's it. That's what white privilege is.
That's perfect.
I actually agree with you. There is a certain white privilege.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
Here's an example of white privilege. In the United States, black babies are 3 times as likely to be killed before they're born.
That's right.
3 times as likely. And that policy is being pushed by white liberals, and particularly white liberals in the government, and it's being paid for by taxpayers through government policies. That is a white privilege. That is a genuine
Absolutely
white
right.
privilege.
You're more likely to survive pregnancy than
yes,
black.
that is, and that there is a racial component to that. Now, what a lot of the documentary centers on is Chelsea Handler's ex-boyfriend, who's a black guy. This guy knocked her up twice when she was in high school. She killed the kid both times. He then went to prison for armed robbery for 14 years. They then reunite. They haven't talked in years and years and years. And she more or less blames society for his problems. By the way, he doesn't blame society really for his problems. He says, I did what I did. I served my time. He says it's harder for black people in America, but he takes much more responsibility for his own actions than she would grant responsibility. And the reason for this, I actually have a theory on white privilege, which is almost exclusively talked about by white liberals.
Of course.
It's not really brought up all that much by racial minorities. I think that white privilege is the response of liberal, atheistic white people to the recognition of original sin. I think what it is obviously this woman has done some terrible things. She feels immense guilt for that. She made a documentary in part about that. And so she recognizes her own fallenness, brokenness, imperfection. And because the atheistic left now lacks the moral framework to discuss metaphysical things, what we would usually call original sin, but you could call fallen nature or imperfection, because they lack that, they have to find a physical cause.
There's no question.
And what is the physical cause? It's your appearance. It's the color of your skin.
And not only that, but again, when you say this guy that she slept with, who went to prison, he went to prison. You said,
14 years.
So when you say that he takes responsibility for himself. If you had a kid, if you had a friend, somebody you cared about, what would you tell him? Would you tell him, "Oh, it's society's fault, man. It's society's fault you robbed that gas station"?
Right.
Or would you say, "Hey, muscle up, look in the mirror, get a pair, take responsibility, do your time, and come back and fix your life"? That is the path. That's the only path to a good life. I mean, that's the only path to a good life. So essentially, this is white people telling black people to live their lives badly so the white people feel better.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what it is. Because when we talked about birth privilege or life privilege, but generally speaking, life is a privilege, right? You didn't earn your own life. You got it as a gift. You're probably going to lose it without much say in the whole matter anyway. And so it's just that difference between looking at life, we all suffer, all racial groups suffer, all individuals suffer.
Right.
The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike, and on the rich and the poor.
And you don't know
alike.
other people suffering.
And you don't know.
That's the thing. You look at a guy and he's got everything. I sat down next to Steve Cannell, one of the great TV writers of the day. He's passed away about 10 years ago or so. But when I first met him, and I sat down next to him, and he did the A-Team, and he did, he did so many of those 70s shows. And I sat down next to him, and he's a billionaire. And I thought, gee, I'm sitting down next to a billionaire writer. I mean, most of us writers are not billionaires, right? And I thought, that's pretty amazing. And we became friends in the last few years of his life. And he was talking to me at this dinner table, and he told me about the death of his son. And his son had fallen through a sand dune and died he was like 12. And by the end of it, I thought, I wouldn't trade places with this man. And he was a great guy, by the way. He was a Christian, and he was an upright guy, and he worked so hard to save his marriage after this tragedy. I thought, but I would not trade places with this guy for all the money and all the success in the world forever. You don't know what's in another guy's life, you know? You don't know. And if you're sitting around worried that somebody has something like you, oh, he's happier, looks happier on Facebook, oh, he has a car I don't have, you are ruining your life.
Right.
But sell that to minorities as a way of life, as a way of thinking, is a sin.
And it's just the irony, because you get Chelsea Handler's ex-boyfriend, who's served hard time for a serious crime, and he's pretty grateful and he's happy to have the job that he has, and he's got a pretty good outlook on life. And then you have the USC law students, who are the creme de la creme. They have made it to the tippy top. They are going to have whatever career and whatever life they want. They are doing nothing but complaining about how life is so unfair to them. It's
unbelievable.
Yes.
And this is the other thing that I see guys, when we go and talk at colleges and all this stuff, and I'll have like a 20-year-old black guy, 6'2", and he's a gym rat and all. Say, microaggressions, man. You go like, are you kidding me? Like be a man.
Be a man. Act like a man.
It's like unbelievable. All right, so we should mention Another Kingdom, because Another Kingdom is coming the final season.
Speaking of act like a man, right?
act like, or only you have to do it in that voice.
Act like a man. I have to tell you, it's the best one yet.
Thank you.
It really is.
I'm so pleased with it.
Which never happens.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be. I expected it to be the worst. I expected it to be like The Godfather, First one's great, second one's pretty good, third one is just unmentionable. This is the best season.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm really happy with it. I'm happy with, each season is different, but it actually does make one work. And
it does.
That's pretty amazing.
It's tremendous. I can't wait for it to come out. And I love, talk about privilege.
Yeah.
You do all the work, and then I go in and I read it, and then I get the credit.
This is why I hate you, Knowles. What are you doing on your show?
So today we're going to be talking about that degenerate son of Joe Biden, Hunter.
God, poor Joe.
Poor old Joe, poor old Hunter. We're going to be analyzing this alleged whistleblower from the real angle and see why any way you cut it. Because I'm not saying Trump is totally innocent.
I know. Yeah.
It's just any way you cut it, this was a disaster for Democrats.
Biden's done.
I think he's almost certainly done.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, is it? I've been predicting Elizabeth Warren, but I don't believe in predictions. You just kind of make them as a habit. But
that's what the polls seem to point to. And once Iowa happens, if she really does win Iowa, then Biden certainly is finished. And the only problem here is the other Democrats need to, speaking of privilege, they need to get a little black support other than Joe Biden.
Yeah.
If they don't, they're finished in the general. So just any way you slice it, really rough week for Democrats.
And if ever blacks start paying attention, they'll vote for Trump because he's doing a great job. All right, good. Your show's coming up. A final reflection. The Emmys were last night. I know you weren't watching it. I wasn't watching it. No one was watching it. Nobody cares anymore because the show business people have made themselves such an anathema to the rest of the country. They have posed themselves against most of America and against anybody who actually loves the country. However, one of the people who won, a lot of the awards went to Game of Thrones as a goodbye, but one of the people who won big was Phoebe Waller-Bridge, the lady who did Fleabag, acted in and wrote Fleabag. She's now writing the James Bond, new James Bond film, so her career is taking off. She is a major talent. She really is. The Fleabag is worth watching. It's 2 seasons on Amazon Prime. It's about this messed up family, this messed up lady who has terrible psychological problems, has a really interesting take on religion and God, which is neither completely buying in nor completely denying it. Here is a wonderful scene where her father, who's just a mess, gives her a gift of going to therapy, and the therapist is Fiona Shaw, one of the truly great British actresses.
So why have you come to the session?
It was a birthday present for my father.
Is that a joke?
No.
It would be good not to make jokes in here, just in case anything gets lost in humorous translation.
Oh, I don't know if I can do that.
Is that a joke?
No.
Oh, just try not to make it very obvious.
Sure.
So why do you think your father suggested you come for counselling?
I think because my mother died and he can't talk about it. And my sister and I didn't speak for a year because she thinks I tried to sleep with her husband, and because I spent most of my adult life using sex to deflect from the screaming void inside my empty heart. I'm good at this. Although I don't really do that anymore.
You close with your family?
We get on with it.
Do you talk?
God, no.
Do you talk to her? God, no. Fiona Shaw, I don't know if anybody remembers the Three Men and a Baby films with Tom Selleck. She was in that, and I remember when I lived in England, I would go and see her on stage, and she is one of their finest actresses, and then they would make fun of her for going to America and picking up all this big money instead of doing what she should be doing, which was her acting craft on stage in London. That is the way they talk about us over in England, is just some place you go to get your bank and then you come back and do your real work on stage. Anyway, tremendous cast. Every performance in it is excellent, and the writing is unbelievable. And she herself, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, is so good. She does this thing where she talks to the camera. You kind of saw a little of it there while she's talking to the characters in the show, and it really is unbelievable, and it's heartfelt. However, I just want to add this one thing, talking about Chelsea Handler, talking about all of show business and how it's alienated itself from mainstream America. It's a story about a girl who is really, really messed up, and no doubt some of it comes from her own life, and maybe a lot of it, I don't know, comes from her own life. And her own life, I don't know that much about her, but there's the usual showbiz divorces and all this stuff. So obviously she's a little bit of a mess. Somebody at the Emmys described her as a grenade, as a gorgeous grenade, I think he called her. So clearly, like many, many talented people, she is a bit of a mess, which is why they should follow the advice of Socrates and just do their job, get their muse, let their muse speak through them, and then shut up. The shut up and sing thing is a real thing. You're watching with Taylor Swift now. You're going to see her really take a hit. As she says, she's now become obsessed with politics. What we all want to know is what Taylor Swift thinks about politics. These people have a gift. They should use their gift, and then they should go home and be very, very quiet because they don't know what they're talking about. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is The Andrew Klavan Show. The Andrew Klavan Show is produced by Austin Stevens and directed by Mike Joyner. Executive producer, Jeremy Boring. Senior producer, Jonathan Hay. And our supervising producers are Mathis Glover and Robert Sterling. Assistant director, Pavel Wydowski. Edited by Adam Sayevitz. Audio is mixed by Mike Cormina. Hair and makeup is by Jesua Alvera. Animations are by Cynthia Angulo. And our production assistant is Nick Sheehan. The Andrew Klavan Show is a Daily Wire production. Copyright Daily Wire 2019.
If you prefer facts over feelings, if you aren't offended by the brutal truth, if you can still laugh at the nuttiness filling our national news cycle, well, tune on in to The Ben Shapiro Show, where you'll get a whole lot of that and much more. We'll see you there.